Okay, we're live, and I want to thank you for joining me, Danielle Kane, host of the Conscious Broadcast today, for an awesome episode with special guest, Mr. Joe Flacco, NFL quarterback and comeback player of the year. Glad
Yeah.
to have you. Welcome. And I
Thanks for
also
having
want
me.
to, yes, and I want to thank Brian Kane, co-owner of Evolution Fitness, from joining me again, and my husband Brian for joining me today.
Yeah,
Also,
thanks for having me.
yeah, Joe's coach, and this is really exciting. So, Joe, I don't know if you know much about the channel other than that I've had one because we've talked about it, but I was really kind of tired of hearing the mainstream narrative and a lot of negative stories, and so I really wanted to hear people's stories themselves, like real, right directly from the source, rather than being edited or whatever. So that's why I like having you here, because then we can really get the full picture of your story that you can share today, because you evolved. I've seen your evolution, and it's been amazing. And so I thank you for sharing it with us and my friends and people that tune into this channel. So thank you.
Yeah, you got it. I'm not sure if I'm much of a storyteller, but I guess we'll find out.
Oh yes. Well, we have some. We're kind of storytellers, Brian and I. So
Yeah.
we'll see how it works out. But well, first, let's just talk about this whole couch story. So as you can see, that our
Sitting on
episodes
the couch right now.
from
Yeah.
couch to consciousness. I guess we're back on the couch, right? Um, so Joe trains at our gym, Evolution Fitness, in New Jersey, South Jersey, and we a lot of the people at our gym were really frustrated that like that kind of was like the theme of all your conversations and the media. So we just want to say we know you weren't sitting on the couch just
Yeah.
eating potato chips. But tell us a little bit about like, how this all came about, like how you were training for life, right? And continue to train even though this season was a little bit different. Can you go into some details with that?
Right. Yeah, listen, I think it's easy to make a story out of, getting up off your couch and going out and throwing the football around a little bit. Um, listen, for me, the fact that we were having some success, you know, run with whatever you want. It was kind of fun to kind of have those stories out there, whatever they may have led some people to believe or not. Um, but I think over the last 15 years, just doing something athletically as my profession, you learn pretty quickly that you can't kind of decide when to turn it on and decide when to turn it off. I mean, obviously, you have some planned regeneration kind of phases in your workouts and things like that. But I think the biggest thing for me is that it's become such a part of my life to keep myself in shape and to do the things that are going to continue, that are going to keep me ready to be on the field, um, to live a long, healthy life, and be able to move around as long as I possibly can. So I think a lot of those things go hand in hand. And because I've been doing it so long now, it's just a part of what I do.
Mhm.
It was very easy to just continue to do my daily routine, which is working out, throwing the football around, and doing a bunch of other things to stay ready. I think if it was one of those things that wasn't really a big part of my life, then it would have been very easy. Um, it wouldn't have been easy. It just would have been what it was. I wouldn't have been in the groove of doing anything, and I probably would have been sitting around and being somewhat lazy and not eating right. And then when you do get that opportunity, you're not ready because you're somebody that's trying to turn it on and off for certain situations. I think it's definitely been nice to be able to just build that into my daily routine, and no matter what the situation is, I feel like I can kind of be ready for it because I'm always doing it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah, I
Well,
think having the versatility, I mean, you're playing a variety of sports too. It's not just football. So getting out on Right. the ball court, and the Yeah. regeneration stuff, and saunas and taking care of your body in a variety of different ways is really key I think as I exposure. a couple of years ago I realized, when you're a kid, what do? You don't go out to the field or the track necessarily. I mean, at some point you do when you're starting to specialize maybe in something, but when you're a kid, you go out there and you just play sports. You go play basketball, you go play whatever it may be. And you get that conditioning and that athleticism from that. Your brain starts to realize how to do things, and I realized a few years ago, like as active as I am because I'm a professional athlete, I'm not probably doing as many of those things that I was doing as a kid. So to try to find ways to do those, and it just makes it more enjoyable. It makes it more sustainable to be doing activities that you really enjoy doing, as opposed to like trying to, I think anytime you're going out to a track or you're going out to a field and you're running, you're doing conditioning or you're doing speed work. I think there's need for some of that stuff, but that can become work to a certain extent.
Mhm.
But when you learn how to make it play, it just makes it much more sustainable over a long period of time because it's something that you really learn to enjoy. And then as far as like the saunas and the cold tubs and all that, I just think that's what happens when that's what you get led to when you've been working out for so long and you're interested in taking care of your body. You just find these different resources that lead you down these different paths, and I think they force you almost to try new things. You get tired of like wondering what something may be like, and you start to just do it and experience it, and you decide what you like and what you don't like.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, can you take us back a little bit when you were growing up with your family? You're one of six, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, and you're the oldest.
Right.
And I have the pleasure to know most of your family members. And your dad was quite rigorous with your outdoor training activities as a child, correct? You want to tell us a
you
little bit
know
about
it,
like what he was
it
doing?
didn't it didn't seem that way. Like obviously he was a little bit different, and he was willing to do things to he was around a lot, and he was willing to do things to kind of push us in that path, whether it was setting different things and contraptions up in our backyard, or
Flipping tires. I heard
yeah,
flip tires.
flipping tires, pushing a car down the
Pushing
street.
cars.
Like how much times did we actually do those things? It wasn't like we were doing them every day, but like the fact that he was willing to kind of do those things and be around and set those things up, it just kind of sets you up for, oh man, like this is, you find ways to, I think every little kid loves hanging out with their dad. So like to find cool ways to hang out with him and do those types of things, it pushed us in that direction. And listen, I think we were probably like most kids, like that stuff felt like work to a certain extent. So it wasn't always the most fun kind of thing. And it wasn't like we were doing it consistently. But I do think that there's something in there that planted a seed for, 15 years down the road, when all of a sudden you do need to do those types of things, and you do need to put in the work, and it just trained us from an early age to be willing to do it and know that it might be hard, but you just got to get out there and do it. So
So you were
so
familiar the first time you came to Evolution Fitness, and then Brian's like, "Hey, you're gonna like flip this tire a bunch of
yeah,
times and push the
yeah.
sled."
You know what? It's totally different working out with somebody pushing you. And, obviously with Brian, you get somebody that's going to push you and make you do hard things. But there's also like very quickly with him, you can trust that, man, he's putting together a good program, because you're seeing the results, and you're feeling how, you're waking up every day and just seeing those results, and, your body feels how good those workouts are being to you. Um, but yeah, like, you know what? Growing up, we played so many different sports and we sprinkled in those different types of things. But even through college, like I really hadn't been in a weight room a ton. Like you have your high school lifting programs, you have your college lifting programs, but I was always just going from sport to sport in high school. So it wasn't like I was lifting in the winter with the football team. I was playing basketball. It wasn't like I was doing anything in this spring and summer with those teams lifting weights. I was going back and forth between baseball, basketball, football. So whatever strength and mobility I did have was really gained from just playing those different sports. And then college, you do get some time to lift, but at the same time, um, you're growing, you're still not as physical as you're going to be. You're playing a lot of football, so your body gets beat up. You're really more mentally focused on the practices and doing well and things like that. So to get on a consistent routine is kind of tough to do. Um, so like when I found Brian, almost 15 years ago, I really hadn't been pushed in the weight room before and actually been on a consistent program. Um, I would say. I mean,
Hmm.
And now to have been on something like that for, like I said, almost 15 years,
Mhm.
you can see the benefits of it, and you can see how much you enjoy doing it, and it becomes part of your life. But I will say, like, those first couple times you get with him, you're like, man, what the hell am I doing? Like, do I want to do this? He's beating the hell out of me. I
Yeah,
wasn't
that
used
first
to,
year was rough.
yeah, you weren't used to that kind of pain, like in a weight room. And you could always kind of just, you know, just chalk it up like, it's not really that important. It's not like I need to bench press 500 pounds and squat 1,000,000 pounds. Because I think even when you're younger, that is the idea. Like when everybody starts lifting, they just want to bench press a lot, squat a lot, do kind of crazy things. They want to look a little bit better. So it's easy to kind of just say as a quarterback, well, I don't need that. But you do realize that you do need something. And yeah, it's not to bench press 500 pounds,
Mm-hmm.
but you need the mobility and the strength within all those mobilities, and you need that to stay healthy and to stay consistent over 20 weeks of an NFL season. You need all those things. You need that good foundation, and that was definitely eye opening, to do that, to start doing that basically 15 years ago. And having a community, having somebody like Brian to run the show, but then having the community around it, it really helps with staying consistent.
Yeah,
Hmm.
agreed. And I think, like you were mentioning, I think the multi-sport athlete has diminished so much over time. And there's so much specialization in sports that, yeah, you get out of balance and you have to program in
Right.
that ability, you have to program in that stability, because those are the things that really make the athlete. And yeah, I think it's great, like, to have a plan and stay consistent with it. The consistency is key. And having a balanced plan is really key. So, um, cool.
Yeah. And so I want to go back a little bit about how we all met. So that was fun. We've talked about you quite a bit, um, well, on my podcast, we've talked about you a little bit, but in general, we talked about the story of how we first connected with you, and it was during the lockdown or the lockout, not the lockdown, the
Yeah.
lockout, another one
Right.
within
Different
the
lockdown.
NFL.
Yeah.
And one of Brian was working at another gym at the time, and one of the clients he was training was like, Joe Flacco's over here. And
Mhm.
Brian, why don't you share a little bit of that story? Because I know you were probably more directly connected with what was going on.
Yeah. Yeah, I was training my client Dave, and Joe was there during the lockout. I didn't necessarily even know who he was. I wasn't big in watching the NFL. So, but Dave knew who he was, and he went up and congratulated him on a good season and introduced us, and I introduced myself. And yeah, we were just crossing paths at the gym, and I mentioned, if you need any training, because I knew they were in the lockout, I'd be happy to help him out. And he was kind of like, local gym guy who knows who this guy is. And at that time, we were building our business, Evolution Fitness, and I had a small training room in that facility that I was doing training in. And I told him, I don't know how much longer I'm going to be here. I'm thinking about opening my own gym. And shortly after that, yeah, I decided that that was the next step, and we started working on Evolution Fitness. And Danielle at the time was working, what was
I
it,
was
Metrics 3?
yes, I was working at Metrics 3, and
Yeah.
we were doing a recruiting event, and it was Dining with the Stars. And there was
Hmm.
an auction, and Joe, I believe you were at the auction, and then you were at the after party, and we were at the after party.
Hmm.
And so I didn't know who you were either. I was like, who is that? Brian's like, Joe Flacco's here. I'm like, well, you better go talk to him. And it was
Yeah, we
great.
were
And I
just
think
hanging
you
out
had,
listening to music, and he happened to be standing right behind me. And I turned around, I was like, "Hey, what's up, Joe?" And he was like, "Hey, you're the guy from the gym." And I was
Yeah.
like, "Yeah." He's like, "What are you doing here?" And I was saying how Danielle's company was running the show for the evening. And yeah, we just got to talking. At the time, he introduced me to his girlfriend, now wife, Dana. And yeah, we're talking. I told him, my background, and I was willing to help him, and how I was on this new adventure. And yeah, we texted back and forth that evening, and we started, I think, the following day, or maybe that Monday, I think.
yeah,
It
And
was
he came into
probably
our
right
Joe
little
around.
Hobbit
came,
house.
yeah, Joe came over our house in a duck to get
Yeah.
inside. We
Yeah, I'm
did
not
talk
sure it
some
was
YouTube.
February, but it was close to this time of the year, probably. It's
Yeah.
probably
Yeah,
sometime in March, maybe.
yeah, because shortly after the season, I remember.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so yeah, we did a movement screen at our house, and then we hit the park, and
Hmm.
hit the ground running, and I don't think he'll ever forget those first couple months.
No, it's crazy to think about how long ago that was. I mean, I can still put myself, doing Spider-Mans for like 50 yards around that around that track.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's crazy to think about how long ago that was. But man,
Yeah, it was
uh,
something
I, I,
totally new for you, I think. And
yeah, it was a lot of the little movements, man. Like the little movements that we did, whether it was my shoulders and mostly my shoulders, all those types of things,
Mhm.
I really struggled with, but had never done them before. And
Yeah.
you can realize that you have to do some of those things to get better at them to a certain extent.
Yeah, for sure. So we were training, I think, 3 days a week or 4 days a week at that time. And then he realized he was getting tortured, so he needed some company. So he started bringing out his brother and a couple other friends and players.
Yeah.
So we had a nice group going there for a while, and
Yeah.
people were trickling off to college and sports,
Yeah.
and we were back on our own. We were training in the rain, the snow.
That's right.
Uh,
Yeah. Listen, it's always nice when you've done it for a couple of weeks and you can bring somebody else out there that's worse at it than you are. You can draw some energy from their pain. So that's
yeah,
what I was doing. But that's why it is good to work out with people. You
yeah,
do like those. You feed off of each other.
yeah. It's a team sport.
And
You have to be in a team environment, you know?
yeah, it helps so much.
Absolutely. And so we started you, so you were like taking a huge chance on us, number one, though. So thank you. And because we didn't even have the facility when you first started
Right.
training. So he was outside with Brian for a while. I wasn't even training yet at
Right.
all. I was, and then we opened the business. And then I remember the following year you came back, you're like, well, what about outside? Right. So we had
Right.
to even
Right. You
adapt
missed
to a new
that. You missed that a
space.
little bit. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. But
pretty
The,
interesting.
the nice thing was you realized how much you can do without a barbell and dumbbells and stuff like that. You get in the best shape of your life at 25 years old with, you know, little equipment
Mhm.
and just putting in some work. So that was cool to see that.
mhm.
Yeah, I think we had a rope, kettlebell, a couple bands.
Yeah, maybe like some kind of medicine ball or something. But
Yeah, a couple
yeah,
medicine ball
it might
things.
have, it might have just been the kettlebell, a couple of park tables, a
Yep,
couple
bark tables.
couple poles to hang the TRX on or whatever,
Yep. A
Yeah.
nice tapered hill in the corner, do some hill work.
Yeah, some bands in the tire maybe at some point with the hill.
Yep.
Uh yeah.
But
Brian,
yeah, I
can you
think it's that versatility and being able to expose yourself to all those elements that you're going to be experiencing on the field is so important. And a lot of players stay inside, they train indoors and they have great facilities, but when you're on the field, it's good to have that experience, get your hands dirty and really kind of be in the elements because that's really what you're going to be playing in. So I think that's a huge part of getting
Yeah,
types of conditions.
it is. And that goes back to just what I think we talked about it a little bit just because it came up was the multi sports, just doing the different things,
Yeah.
putting your body just you grow up putting your body in different situations and you just kind of
Mhm.
learn how to move around a little bit more free and efficiently because of it.
Yeah, I kind of lost my
definitely?
train of thought on that, but yeah, one of the things like athletes are athletes because they play,
Right.
and they build that like you're saying that body awareness, that athleticism, and they're not necessarily workout specialists,
That's right.
They
Yeah.
they go to the gym and they just follow the guidelines. It's not like they're professional, bodybuilders or anything like that.
Yeah.
A lot of those programs are sometimes designed around that. So um expecting an athlete to be able to just go to the gym and work out, that's kind of where I met you, is at that gym, kind of spinning your wheels, walking around, kind of trying to
For sure.
figure out the gym a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's really what kind of caught my eye was this guy doesn't, I don't think really know what he's doing right now. And I think he needs something. And that's one of the reasons I initially approached you. And yeah, so athletes that don't even sports coaches, they're coaches, they're specialists in the sport, they're not specialists in the conditioning and the training. And having somebody around that can write a program and to be able to um, do it in a way that's going to treat the athlete and optimize performance is really key. So I wouldn't expect any athlete to be able to just go to the gym in the off season. So having that supervision is really
Yeah.
key.
There's also a mental component to that. Is like when you're kind of floating around and you're working out, but you're not really sure what you're doing. You're
Mhm.
not. you're not as confident that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like there's a little bit of like doubt in your head, I think, when you're just kind of doing your own thing as to, am I doing enough? Am I putting enough
Mhm.
work in? So then
And
when
that
the
doubt
season,
can put you at risk for
right,
injury too.
right. And then the season comes around and, you're not there. Maybe there's a little bit more doubt, but when you have somebody that's putting those things together for you and they're pushing you and you're pushing yourself,
And you're seeing what you do.
whether you're doing more or less work or just you're working more efficiently, you have that confidence. Like, I've been doing this. I've been working my tail off for the last 6 months to get to this point, and
Yep.
you don't even blink. You've prepared because you've had somebody there by your side. And I
Yeah.
think that's important when you're doing something, you know, that you need to perform. You need to have that, even if it's not a real mental edge, you think you have it. I think that's important.
Mhm. Yeah, and that first year, there's a lot of mental conditioning to us. Don't bend over to breathe. People,
Yeah,
people see you
simple little
bending
things.
over, and it puts you at risk. Little things like that go a long way.
Yeah.
That standing confidence on the field, people see you're not breaking down, and it's like, all right, this game's going. We're keep going.
Brian, one thing I wanted to ask you, if you could kind of go into a little bit more detail of like looking at Joe, seeing him, like you said, at that
Yeah.
gym, and then coming in your mind, having a plan for someone at his level of playing football.
Yeah.
What would you say is the most important priority that you wanted to address first? And like, how do you build a program to
Mhm.
be able to assist this person to get them ready for NFL play?
Yeah, I mean, I start everything with a movement screen so I can understand their body. We all have primary movement patterns that are pretty much universal across the board. We all have the same design of structural systems. So there's specific patterns that we have to be able to perform. And when I do a movement screen, then I can identify, hey, something's out of balance, something's too tight, something's too loose. If we need to add stability, if there's a trunk instability. So all this information I can gather, then I can kind of take a bigger picture of what needs to be done. And then basically I kind of work backwards. What is the goal? Where are we trying to get to? And once I know the destination, then I can build a roadmap of specific, checkpoints that I need to get to be able to get to that destination. So when I wrote a program for Joe, I realized, he had a lot of shoulder stuff, tightness going on. He had some trunk instability. He had some sway back. There's a variety of things that, as an athlete, he was harnessing elasticity and using his body in a way that was performing the action, but over time he would start to break down. So identifying those weak links and then building a program to retighten things that are loose, loosen things that are too tight, create stability and oppositional movement patterning so the body can experience multiple planes of motion, up, down, twisting, changing direction. Athletes typically have problems with deceleration and change of direction. So we worked on a lot of that as well, being able to come to a complete stop, being able to generate, power in different directions. All of those components are what athletes need. So first we address, hey, where's the movement issue? And once I can build a foundation of good movement, then I can start to add athleticism and strength and power onto that movement. And then once, all of that pyramid of, mobility and movement, and then, strength and power, then we can start to focus on skills. And Joe's a professional athlete. He's got the skills, he's got gifts, and he's had coaches to work on all those skills. So I wasn't necessarily a skills coach for him. I was his athletic trainer. I was teaching him really how to be an optimal performance. So all of those programs that I designed, everything includes a warm-up, a mobility program, a core program, some type of power elasticity, depending on what athlete I'm working with or what I'm seeing in their actual movement capacity. I'll build specific things. And basically you start with the least demand for the greatest return. And then, as you see improvements, you just keep leveling up and just always trying to move, super compensation and growth always up and to the right. And always checking in, always knowing, hey, is something going on? Are you feeling sore? And I've done a lot of body work on Joe and also some of his family members, and being able to always be checking your balances and always making sure you're hitting those benchmarks to be able to make the progress. So that, hey, when game day comes, I know Joe's going to be able to get on the field. He's going to feel confident. He knows he's going to be ready. He's going to be able to throw the ball. He's not going to have pain. All of those things where now he's ready to be able to, be optimally on the field to maximum capacity. So yeah, I pretty much designed everybody's program
I was going to say that.
just the same way as I would for a professional athlete, as for a 70-year-old woman. It's just being able to pick where they are on a specific movement capacity. So if they can't squat, we're going to work on just, hey, can we get the ankle and the knee working together? And then we can build that pattern up. And then over time, you start to see, wow, now I'm squatting. Now I'm starting to be able to do daily activities. I have higher energy levels. All these things of optimal health and vitality start to show up in your daily life, and activities, daily living get easier, and you don't feel those aches and pains, and we try to address the whole system.
Mm-hmm.
And like we've had Joe on specific nutrition plans, and we have a farm co-op that comes to our gym so people can get really good food. All of those components of fitness and lifestyle are really key. And I think Joe's got a huge base of knowledge now at this point from being with us and practicing it for the past 15 years. And I think anybody can get there.
Yeah. Joe, do you remember how it felt after the first year of training and then coming back again? Like getting back into the movement? Did it take some time to get adjusted? And then after a while, it was just like you knew what to expect.
Yeah. Every year is obviously a little bit easier to come back. You come back with a little bit better foundation. You build it up, and you kind of get it good, and then you go get it torn down a little bit for sure. But you definitely come back with a better foundation, and that's kind of what's happened every year is you don't get as torn down, and you come back and you know what to expect, and your body adapts to things a little bit easier because it's been through it, and it's been prepared to do those things. But listen, I just remember feeling like excited about the first 6 months or so that we worked together. I was just excited about what I was able to do. And so that next year, I don't necessarily remember how my body felt, but I was excited to get back at it and start that all over again and see what can happen, see how much I can grow.
I think you guys wound up in the Super Bowl that year too.
I think the first year
ball got swatted out of the end zone, I think.
Yeah. I think the first year, I think the first year I was working with you, that next season we lost I think we lost in the AFC Championship game the season after our first year together. Yeah. I want to say it was after my third season that we met up, and my fourth year we lost to New England, and then it was the next year. So after the second off season that we had kind of worked together, that we ended up winning.
Yeah, that's right. That was exciting. We were so thrilled.
Yeah, we were pumped, man. That was a super awesome time. But yeah, back to a point, like after that first season, I remember coming, Danielle and I had been invited to a game. We came out and watched the game, and seeing you
we're sitting
before and after a game. Yeah, it was in the diner, and I was like, whoa. I saw how much you got torn down in a single game, and I was like, we need something a little bit different here, and over the course of that time, I mean, your entire posture, your entire structural design has significantly changed to more upright, sturdy, stable and conditioned person. So after a game, you're walking off the field pretty much looking the same now versus those first few years.
Yeah, man, I feel like I was like a little kid. I probably, I don't think a ton of people get to do this, so they don't get to work out and see how physical they can be after, 18. I think everybody thinks their peak physicality is 18, 19, 20 years old. But then when you're actually able to do something for up close to being 30 years old, you realize, man, I wasn't a full adult. I wasn't really you're not really the max of who you can be until you probably get to right around 30 years old, in terms of explosiveness, and your body's finally kind of done growing and capable of filling out and being as strong as it can be. And I mean, obviously part of that was the fact that I hadn't had a real program up until that point, but also you get rid of being a little bit of a kid and still growing and figuring out what your body is to knowing what your body is, and now putting the strength on top of that. So yeah, I can remember back at those times just
Mhm.
trying to maintain
Yeah.
and not really having any idea as to how to do that.
Mhm.
And I can't imagine. Listen, back then you're able to get away with it for
Yep.
sure, but the question is just how long can you actually get away with
Yeah, you
that?
were fortunate
So
enough to not have too many
yeah,
injuries.
right. Like as soon it's just you never know. You could be feeling fine but there's all kinds of issues and then one day something happens and it throws you all out of whack and 2 years
Mhm.
later your career's over.
Mhm.
So to just have that foundation to get over that point and actually build a good base. I mean, who knows how many years it allows you to continue. It has allowed me to continue to go beyond if I just kind of kept down the path that I was.
Mhm.
Yeah.
How
And
was,
at this
can I
point
ask a quick question?
at this point it's maintenance too.
Yeah.
It's you've gained so much that it's a maintenance plan at this point. And when we taper you back in and like this past off season, I was like, I think you're gonna get a call, man. I'm gonna just keep you ready.
Yeah,
Stay ready
yeah,
because
yeah,
things could change at a moment's notice.
yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to say, Joe, you had, I don't know what year it was, but you did have the ACL, meniscus, MCL tear, correct?
Yeah, not a
With,
meniscus wasn't involved.
okay,
Thankfully, I think that probably would have
good.
caused more issues than the things I actually did deal with. But my ACL and MCL needed to be repaired.
Mhm.
How did you feel after that injury and then the protocol? You know, you worked, I think that was the first season we didn't see you come back. And
Yeah, I
then
stayed in Baltimore.
yeah.
Mhm.
How did you feel after that injury? I mean, how is your knee now? And then working, I know you worked with Brian a little bit the following year. How did you feel after that was probably the biggest injury I think you've had
Yeah,
in your
yeah.
career.
So I ultimately don't think my knee will ever be, you know, quite a real knee. But at the
Mhm.
same time, it's not something that I notice or limits me in any way. Um, every now and then, maybe I feel a little bit of something, but ultimately, it doesn't do anything. But that first season back, so I got surgery in December, and I was back for training camp, and it worked.
Mhm.
I could be pretty efficient and do most things on it, but it didn't feel back to normal that whole season. So September, October, November, December, a little bit of January. It wasn't till that next off season, getting back in the gym, having just over a year since I'd had the surgery,
Mhm.
that I actually got that knee back to
Mhm.
to what I would want it to be.
Mhm.
I got it back and strong, and I felt healthy, and I got through that season. I maintained and I did what I could to get through that year with that knee, but it definitely wasn't until a year and a couple months out where I was like, okay, I'm not even paying attention to this thing anymore.
Mhm.
I think
Mhm.
even beyond the strength part of it, um, what I realized was all of a sudden my brain and like my feet weren't connected the
Mhm.
way they were before that.
Mhm.
Like you put a 6-inch box in front of me during my rehab, and there was just so much doubt as to whether I could do it, even though I could do it. There
Mhm.
was so much doubt in my head as to the first couple of times you're doing it. Can I make this jump? And then even after you can make the jump, there's just something that's missing there. Something's
Mhm.
not firing right. Um, and by the time the season came around, it wasn't like I was feeling those things, but I'm sure they were still there to a certain extent. It's like, is the connection, is the mind body connection there as much as it
Yeah.
normally is? And it probably wasn't. So that's probably also what I was feeling a little bit that next off season was kind of getting some of that back and
Mhm.
everything kind of tied back into each other.
Yeah. And Brian, I mean, obviously you worked on
Networking.
Joe. That was the first time I think you really extensively did your um trigger point therapy work and just like your active table time. You want to go into
Yeah.
a little bit about that?
Yeah, we did a lot more tissue work, and still, I mean, I don't work on Joe so much anymore because he's doing pretty good at this point in time. But um, yeah, I mean, in any type of those situations, I mean, that 1 year mark is pretty much the time where it starts to feel like, hey, this is my knee again, which is a great opportunity to also take advantage of, hey, let's get in there and make sure there's not any scar tissue building up. Let's make sure that we're not getting any soft tissue adhesions or trigger points that may be misfiring at the knee, and or hamstring or hip or ankle that are limiting, our progress. So doing tissue work and trigger point release is definitely a huge part of re-networking that knee, because if there's any restrictions in your movement and that the signals just aren't going in the appropriate sequence through from the foot, ankle, knee, hip into the back, other things start to come up, or you have these asymmetries that start to develop, or restrictions at the ankle. And that's typically what we see is people that have ACL injuries is their ankles get tight, and then their hip starts to get tight because their knee is like it's not moving right. So everything starts to compensate. So addressing that mobility and the tissue work is really key to helping everything really get back into its best environment for healing, and then its opportunity to actually create the best actual healing, get the actual healing in the process, re-networking the nerve roots, making sure that the ankle and the knee are sequenced together, the knee and hip are sequenced together. So it starts to feel like, hey, I can cut now and not have to think about it, because I know where my foot is, and I know that I can decelerate and I can feel that leg hit the ground right, and I can rebound off that. And having that confidence is really, really key, specifically for any athlete that's going to be on the field. And yeah, that network is cut. Anytime they cut you open to do surgery, you're literally cutting nerve fibers. So they take a long time to rebuild themselves, and they need a lot of different types of stimulation in order to really be able to perform at optimal capacity after recovery.
That's amazing.
So,
And it's
yeah,
important. I mean, so many athletes that have had, an ACL tear that I know. I mean, it's like this epidemic really of what's going on there. And Brian, like you said before, what we do is now we have more than just one soccer season, more than just one basketball season. It's like you're playing basketball and football and baseball. And it's just like these children don't have any time to recover.
Yeah, that is really huge. And I think that, like I said, that's kind of like the death of the multi-sport athlete. But we find that still the best optimal performers are the ones that are playing multiple sports. And I think that there's something to be said about that. But yeah, it's unfortunate to see that there is so much specialization, because it does limit the future of movement for people. And a lot of sports are specifically repetitive in certain ways, and they can eventually, if you start too young, it can cause bone growth problems and growth plates. We've seen that in little league pitchers in their elbows. And it's important to, if you're doing a specific movement in one direction, that you need to balance it in the other direction, because you build overdevelopment in certain types of movement patterns, and that's what starts to throw you off. If you get too strong in one area, you don't want to keep training that area. You want to make sure that it's balanced in the opposing direction, or be able to resist the forces. Like a pitcher, those pitchers that throw hundreds and hundreds of pitches, they develop. And Joe himself, I mean, just the muscular structural design in his throwing arm is completely different from his non-throwing arm. So I have to keep that in mind when we're designing programs. But repetitive throwing, you're going to develop a pattern, a rotational pattern in one direction, so much so that eventually it gets so strong that it tears your rotator cuff in the back, because it doesn't know how to pull this direction. It's the opposite direction they have to train to be able to resist the power in the other direction. So all of those things, if you're not doing multiple sports, like in basketball, you're doing layups, that's the opposite of throwing a pitch. Having that balance in your sports is really important, and specialization can lead to a lot of, limitations for future development.
And one thing that we talk about too at the gym is like, even if you are going to play multi-sport, which I'm all a fan of it, I'm just saying like where the actual season never ends, because that's part of the process. You should have a preseason, in-season, postseason, recovery for that sport. And I think that's so important. Joe, you could probably speak on
my
that
program
too.
is designed for that as well.
Well, yeah, I think when like we were talking about the ACL, and like most ACL injuries are non-contact. That's the scary thing, and that's why I think that's why you do see people with multiple ACLs, because they're mostly non-contact, which would lead you to believe that there's probably an issue with something with how they're doing things.
Cutting.
So it's just kind of waiting to happen again when they get back out in the field, and whether that's them, whether they're not giving themselves enough rest, or they're not or like we talked about, they're only specializing in one thing, so their body's not used to reacting. At least in my case, whether you want to say it was a good thing or a bad thing, my knee got collapsed in on, so it wasn't like it was like I was
You got
running
a
around
contact injury.
my
Yours would be
ACL. Yeah, mine was contact, but yeah, they typically are not, which is kind of crazy. It's like, man, what happened? And I do think, listen, as a parent, especially in today's world, you have that fear that you're not putting your kid into something when every other kid in town is doing it. And you, like, even me as a professional athlete, I know that it's important to have some off time. I know that it's important as a child to be a child and to learn how to play these games by just playing, not by grinding every single day for hours a day, every single day of the year. That's just not what you need. Most of the guys that you see at the top level, they weren't, maybe not most of them, but a lot of them weren't playing football when they were 6 years old. They were good athletes that decided to play football or knew they were going to play football at a certain point, but they didn't play it until they were 12 years old, and some of them, some guys you don't see, they don't play till high school. Now there's other sports obviously that are more specialized and more skilled in certain ways that you need to play those to get better at them. But I would still say, like, all of the sports, they really feed off of each other, and you get better at certain things because you do, everything else. But as a parent, you want to just, like I said, everybody's doing
to fall into it.
and it's not usually one thing anymore. It's two or three things. And there's not as much play on the schoolyard anymore either. So when your kids do physical activities, you do have to sign them up to a certain extent, but then you just go crazy with it. It's like you could just sign them up for one thing, but you're like, but Johnny's doing this and Sarah's doing this, so we need to sign our kid up for this. And even for somebody like me who knows that that's not necessarily the right path, you have to fight that urge to want to do it.
Societal factors kick in.
Right. And then there's all the iPads and there's everything else today that you feel
that
like
we didn't have.
that you feel like you have to get them off of. But at the same time, like when I was a kid, we had a video game system and we didn't ask my parents to play on it. We played on it. And we knew that at some point we were probably going to get kicked out. And we had such a good friend group and we built such a base of doing other things that we really ultimately didn't want to do that often anyway.
Yeah.
So it's just, things are a little bit different now. And I just wish, I think the thing that would get us out of all the organized sports and doing it all year would be, as parents, giving the kids a little bit more freedom to like walk out the front door and roam around the neighborhood and knock on each other's doors and things like that. And that, because that doesn't exist anymore, well, you don't want your kids sitting inside, so you have to sign them up for something. And
the knock on the door, are you playing today, is very few and far between.
It's still around, but it's just not as much as it was, 30 years ago. And like I said, I think that just tends to, all of a sudden that's not happening. So one parent signs their kid up for this, and then they say, "Oh, you're doing that? Well, I need to do it." And then another parent does it, and then another, and another. And that's where we are today with just everything being organized. They're going from after school training to a game at night. They're getting to bed at 10 o'clock. They're not eating what they should be eating. And then you stack that for 15 years. And it's like, if the kid's still mentally capable of doing it by the time he's 18, he probably isn't physically capable of doing it anymore.
Because burned out before they get there.
You wore him down in some way. But like I said, even knowing that, it's hard to not get caught up in that, and you have to remind yourself.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned something that I wanted to bring up too, that kind of will segue into like your most recent year. Kind of like you said, this I want to call like flow state. Like you obviously had something innate in you from a young age. Like you said, you weren't always playing football all the time. Tell me a little bit about how you knew there was something going on with this sport, because it's an amazing feeling to know when you know how to throw exactly where you want it or how far, and it doesn't exert, like it's not a lot to do it. And obviously you have that gift of your arm.
Oh man. Listen, I mean, I think there's obviously like social cues that we get from like everybody that we're around. It's like, and you're probably constantly searching for those things a little bit. Like we're always probably looking for some kind of reward here and there, whether it's your dad saying, "Oh man, great throw, way to catch the ball,"
Hmm.
or whether it's your peers looking and watching you throw and say, "Okay, like that looks pretty good."
Hmm.
But like it's tough to look at it that way. I don't know. Like I don't think I had like a realization like I'm pretty good at throwing the football. I wonder if I can
Hmm.
do this. But you
Hmm.
just do it and you enjoy doing it. And obviously, I think the better you do it, it's easier to enjoy because you're obviously getting that like stimulus from other people. Like when people think that you do something well, it feels good that you think you kind of know that you can kind of feel that. So you enjoy doing it more and more and more, and then because you do it more and more, you get better at it. And the next thing you know, you're getting like when I went to high school, I didn't have any idea. I knew I wanted to go play in college, but like I just thought like, oh yeah, I want to go play in college. Like I never really thought past that. I didn't know like they started sending you recruiting letters and your coach would send highlight tapes out and game film out and people would
Mm.
come to your high school and like come see you do other things. And I didn't know the recruiting process until all of a sudden I was in the middle of it.
Hmm.
Wow.
So I don't know if there was ever like one realization of doing it. It was just kind of going through the different processes and the different steps. And I think every step along the way, it was like, okay, I got to prove to myself and to everybody else that I can still do this, that I can do
Hmm.
this at this level. And I think there's still a certain bit of that in me today. Like I got to go play for the Cleveland Browns this year.
Hmm.
And it wasn't like I was thinking about, oh man, I'm good at this. Like I was going and thinking about, all right, how am I going to fit in this locker room this late in the season? How can I
Hmm.
show? Like I got to make sure that when I go out to practice, any opportunity that I get, I show these guys in this locker room that I can play.
Hmm.
And I also got to show it to myself. Like having that success out there, whether it's in a practice or it can be as simple as that, a simple throwing session.
Hmm.
um, that you just kind of build that confidence that like, yeah, okay, I can still do this.
Hmm.
So I think you're constantly trying to um, get better um, and keep that confidence to a certain point where you can go perform. And in order to do that, you have to continuously do it and put yourself in those situations
Hmm.
that kind of force you to perform and get over certain things.
Awesome. Did it feel good? We loved watching you. Everyone at Evolution Fitness was rooting you on. Like literally, I have to put a shout out to all of our members who
Yeah.
are watching and are going to
Yeah,
see this later. They like love being a part of the experience. You
yeah,
being a part of the gym. You just like everybody else. And I appreciate that aspect of you because you appreciate their level of commitment to their program. It energizes you, and it's like a big family. It's like our own little team inside Evolution. So I want
Hmm.
to thank them, and I want to thank you for being part of that experience.
Yeah, we were there
yeah,
this morning working out with everybody.
yeah. No,
Talking
yeah.
about this.
Listen, it feels good. It was cool to hear from everybody and to you're in your own element when you're out there and you're playing, but to come back and kind of hear from how many people I have heard from that they were kind of watching and they were rooting for me. That stuff feels good. I mean,
Yeah.
Hmm.
uh, you don't want to let it get to your head, but like I said, it's nice to hear that you have that kind of community out there and that people care the way they do um, about a stupid game that I
Yeah.
just happen to like playing and can do it for a living. So, you know,
Yeah.
It's not fun to watch unless you're playing. I'll tell you that. Brian and I don't watch a lot of
yeah,
sports, and when you're out there, it's like, you know, it's your
We're
best
turning
friend
it
out
on.
there,
We're
and
like,
you're
hey,
just
let's
like,
check out the
yeah.
yeah.
game.
Yeah, you're connected. You're not necessarily connected to the sport. Even for like my family, who's connected to the sport, we love the sport. We love
Hmm.
other sports as well. We just love
Mhm.
athletics. Once you have somebody that's involved in it, or once it's you that's involved in it, it does change your relationship to that sport a little bit.
Hmm.
We still sit around on Sundays and watch other games, but it's not like it was when I was a kid where we were just watching it for pure enjoyment
Hmm.
and hoping to be there someday.
Mhm.
It's not the same. It's changed since I've been out there and been doing it. And I don't know what that is, but um, you know, I deal with that a lot, honestly, because, growing up, it was such a cool thing. And it was something that we had so much fun doing. And then no matter what your job is, it is a job, So like, you know, being in the NFL is hard to describe as a job, but when you're doing it as long as I have, it is your profession. It's a job. And I want my kids to be interested in athletics, but my perspective on these things is a little bit different than like what I grew up with. So I hope that I want my kids to view it like I viewed it. I don't want them to necessarily view it like I view it now. So I do struggle with that at certain times. Like
Yeah.
I don't necessarily like, even though I do end up watching the games on Sunday, it's not like I'm like waiting around to put the games on Sunday. But as a kid, we probably did do that a little bit. I don't want my kids to necessarily feel that. So I got to remind myself every now and then, like, hey, be excited about the fact that the games are on. This is going to get them into the sport, and it's going to lead wherever it's going to lead. I do think there's so many cool things about playing sports, especially team sports, because that's all I've ever done. That there's so many benefits of your children playing team sports. And that's ultimately why I want them to have a very positive outlook on all these things. And whether that's striving to be an NFL player or striving to be a great high school player, like there's so many benefits on being around a bunch of guys that have a common goal, and you learn so much from it that I want I want all my children to have a positive outlook on it. But I don't necessarily have that same outlook that I had as an 8-year-old kid. I still do have a lot of fun with it, but watching the game is not the same as it was back then.
You see all the other stuff.
you see, yeah. It's just it's different. It's different.
It's a job,
but
like you said. It wasn't a job when you were playing before because you were having fun with it and you were seeing it from a different perspective. And now that you're in it, it's different.
Right, and hey, it's you gotta remind yourself of certain things sometimes, and that things are a little bit different, but it is still a ton of fun to play. I mean, there's not, it's hard. It's when you make it to that level, I mean, you can talk about how hard it is, but ultimately the people that are at that level are pretty good at it. So it's not like it should be like, like calculus. Like calculus is much harder for me than playing in the NFL. But to win a game in the NFL is a hard thing to do, and Absolutely. to get to do that with like 60 other guys or more, when you include the coaches and the whole organization, it's just so much fun. So I was like very fortunate for the fact that I got to go out there and experience some more of that this year.
Yeah, awesome. And your mental toughness, I mean, it definitely is something that is another talent of yours. And I'm going to just share it. Like Joe just did his first sweat lodge this weekend with us. So that requires a lot of mental toughness. And I mean, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about it.
Stepping outside of the box.
What's that?
And stepping outside of a normal box.
Joe and Brian have had this relationship where not only have they been together with the fitness, but they've also explored other areas. Like you said, you seek these other things where you guys are doing, cold plunges and saunas. And so let's talk a little bit about, how you kind of even started wanting to do these things.
Right. Listen, if you
started planting seeds in his head.
Yeah. Look at this guy. That's how. Listen, if you would have told me 20 years ago that I was going to be hanging out in a sweat lodge and doing what we did the other day, I would have said, "What the hell are you talking about? That's just the craziest thing." What? Like even today, I would probably, if I was like looking at what I was doing, like as a fly on the wall, I probably would have been like, "What the hell is this guy doing? Like, what are you doing this for?" But I don't know. I think it's cool to meet new people and try new things. And like, I am not necessarily the guy that like needs to try a bunch of new things, but I don't have fear of missing out. I don't have any FOMO of doing things that I don't want to do. If I don't want to do it, okay, you can go do it, but I don't care. But I think there is certain things that I found myself interested in over the last 20 years. Like I always love to talk about certain things. And like when I hear somebody's done something, I love to ask them questions about it and sit there and say, when, but why would you want to do that? Okay. And how was it when you did it? And you know what I ended up finding was a lot of the times is they can talk about it and they can try to they can try to tell you what it was like and maybe try to tell you why they did it, but it's very hard for them to get across exactly those reasons. It was their reason, and they just wanted to do it. And maybe it's very hard to talk about some of these experiences. You just have to do it. And I realized that a few years ago, and I haven't had a ton of experiences that are really outside of my box. But a couple of years ago, I realized, like, okay, it's still fun to talk about these things and ask questions, but at some point, you're going to have to experience some different things for yourself and be willing to go outside of the box a little bit, because, you know, talking about it and it can only get you so far. Let's just go see what this is about. So, you know, that's kind of where I am today. It's kind of fun to have those new experiences, and I can stop talking about it and get to experience it a little bit. And now maybe I can be the guy that, you know, somebody asks me how it was. So,
Yeah. Yeah, the sweat lodge is definitely an experience for sure.
it is, man. It was like I was telling everybody, it was a long time sitting on the ground, and for somebody as big as me, I'll use that as an excuse. But man, my hips and my lower back were like fried by the end of it. But it is. You talked about being mentally tough. Like you do have to be. You give those people credit just for that alone. Like sitting through those sessions. It gets hot and it gets long and it is hard. So I think doing hard things, even if you get nothing else out of something like that, doing hard things and like succeeding and you did it, you feel that sense of accomplishment. Like that's so powerful to do something that you know was hard, and
I say it's just like
you survived.
Just expanding your exposure and experience is I think hugely important for your mental capacity. But yeah, I think even like getting out barefoot, you've done some cold plunges in the ocean, you know.
I agree.
Doing a variety of things, even working out on the beach, you know.
Yeah. No, listen.
Challenges that you haven't necessarily done before, I think, are really important to expand your horizon and also expand your ability to withstand certain things.
It's funny you bring up those things because, like, listen, I have sneakers on right now, and I will have those on until about a half hour before I go to bed. You know what I mean? But like, so like I'd buy, like, listen, I walk out in my backyard barefoot every morning now. Like even just doing certain things, like, listen, I would look at me and say, man, what's this weirdo doing? Like, why is he doing that? And I still do that. Like if I saw somebody working out on the beach like this summer that wasn't me, I still probably have an inclination to say, what are they doing? Just go work out in the gym. Like, but I'm doing that same thing now. Like, and like I said, I'm wearing my sneakers probably until I go to bed tonight. But at the same time, I'm more willing to kind of step out of my box and do some things that I would typically look at a person and say, why? Just why? Well, you know, can't you just kind of do what normal people do and, you know, go work out by yourself and go. But then you start to realize, like, okay, well, it is normal to work out on a beach. Like, if you have it, why wouldn't you? It is normal to walk barefoot. That's more normal. And not that I do it all day, but you know, you look at things a little bit differently than I did 20 years ago, and I was just some dumb kid that, you know, wanted to find funny reasons to pick on certain things and all that.
When I was coaching, I actually made the girls walk barefoot.
Yeah.
I was like, we're going to do some grounding today. And they're all like, this is weird, but it feels really good. It's like they instantly started connecting.
But you can see, you see guys on teams now, like like pretty much every team I'm on now, like you'll see guys go out onto the practice field, which are all grass, and they'll just walk around barefoot.
Yeah.
There was a picture that went somewhat, like, at least I saw it. It went somewhat viral for two of the 49ers guys. They're Christian McCaffrey and Kyle Juszczyk, who I played with, Kyle, in Baltimore. They were out on their practice field and they had their tights on and they were rolled up high and they were getting their sunlight and they were grounding in their bare feet on the practice field. And most people are probably looking at them like, what the hell are they doing? And even I texted those guys like, oh, like, you know, kind of laughing about it, picking on them a little bit because it's fun to do that. It's just always going to be fun to do that. But at the same time, like, I'm doing the same thing. Like it's cool to see that that's kind of, it's becoming something that, you know, people want to do. And I think we talked about it earlier. It's just like when you work out, when you're interested in becoming the best version of yourself in terms of taking care of your body and all that, it's just the natural cycle that you get to this point. You get to
Mm-hmm.
the point that those guys are at, where you're, you know, listening to different podcasts and you're trying to get your sunlight and you're grounding and doing all those
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
I think even when you first start doing it, you don't even necessarily have to believe that it's going to do anything, but you know, but
You feel it.
yeah, you do. But like, you're interested in whether it will do something, and then you go
Mm-hmm.
out there, and whether and even if all you're getting out of it is the enjoyment of going out and being in the sun and being in nature for a little bit, even if that's all you're doing, you're still you feel like you got something out of it, and you did, because it was just, you spent time to, I don't know, recenter
Harm
yourself.
Yeah.
yourself.
And
You were even
yeah,
going to say,
it's
you were
like,
saying tapping in. I feel like we're all at this place. This is, again, this is why this podcast even exists, because there's something that happened to my consciousness that was curious and was tapping into something. And I just wanted to have conversations, because look at you. Like, I wouldn't have grounded either. I wouldn't have done half the things, half the stuff that I talk about
right.
10 years ago. I'd be like, what is she even saying? And
Right. Well,
so,
Thank
like,
you.
yeah, like I haven't. I keep saying to myself that I want to start meditating, and I just can't. I'm not quite there yet. I haven't really decided to do it. You know, my youngest brother Tom, like, he was doing it for a while,
Mhm.
and man, he's somebody I trust, and he
yeah.
was saying it's unbelievable. It's so beneficial to do it, and I would have laughed off meditation 20 years ago, and and even today, like, I'm going to poke fun at it, like my brother when he was doing that, like, I'm going to poke fun at it, but I also do believe it. It's just poking fun at it
Because
is
he's
it's just
your
part of
youngest
hanging
brother.
out. It's just part of hanging out with the guys and doing that kind of stuff. But 20 years ago, I never would have done it. Now I'm at the point where, like, I need to do that. What am I doing? Like,
Yeah.
get yourself to the point where you're going to do that. Find time to do it and just do it. And yeah, I'll make fun of myself, and hopefully my kids will make fun of me and say, Dad, what are you doing that for? And then, you know, and I love that. You know, all that does is breed conversation about it. And I
Mhm.
can tell them, like, well, this is why I'm doing it. And maybe
Mm-hmm.
one day you'll want to do it, you know, whatever. It, it, it it's all good. And I think that's why, you know,
Having
the
more laughter in our
relationship,
life is
yeah,
so
the
important.
relationship that you have with those things
Mm-hmm.
is pretty cool. And like, it's just another way to, like, stay connected to the people that you really care about. Like, now all of a sudden we're getting together, and we get together a lot, but now all of a sudden we're talking about something that we never could have imagined ourselves talking about. And yeah, we're
Mhm.
making fun of each other for it, but also we're having a lot of fun, and it's like
You're
sparking
learning a little bit.
it's sparking different interests, you know. And when you're thinking about those different things, I guarantee you that you're at a base level, eating healthy and working out, you know what I mean? Like, so
You've gotten to that
if
point
you're
where you
thinking about all
found.
those other things, then I think you're definitely setting yourself up for, you know, what you want to be. You don't have to do it all, but you're probably doing some basic things, just because you're conscious of doing
Yeah.
There it
Awesome.
is. Couch to consciousness.
Yep. Yeah. See, we're here. We made it.
it.
Couple steps. Oh my gosh. This conversation was amazing. See, I told you you'd be a great storyteller. Um, is there anything, Brian, that you would like to say before we wrap up?
No, I mean, it's just been a pleasure working with Joe over the past 15 years and becoming friends and, now sweat lodging with him and,
Yeah.
you know, having multiple experiences in our life. And that's what, I think more people need to be doing. They need to be in touch with each other. And I think that, building community is exactly how that happens. It's just inviting. People need to be invited sometimes to try something new or step outside of their box. And sometimes they find that, what, that step that I took, changed my perspective and changed my um perception sometimes of what those things look like. And that having that exposure experience, it just continues to grow you as a person and develop you as a more, a better father, a better, brother, better, whatever you want to be over the course of time. And I think, reaching out and trying new things like we did this weekend at the Sweat Lodge and being a part of all of this. And Danielle's conscious broadcast has been
Yeah, you guys doing this was
phenomenal.
another level of opening up, even kind of making fun of it, like, in a way, like, oh, you're on my podcast. I kind of like downgrade what I'm doing here, but it brings me so much joy and laughter. And that's what I enjoy. I want more of that in my life. So I thank
Mhm.
you guys so much. Joe, thank you so much for sharing your story and just like who you are. We just like love hanging out with you and your family. Your wife's amazing. She is just as strong, if not like one of the strongest females in our gym. Like she blows me away. So like it's just so great to witness you incorporating, this in your life, and we're just honored to be a part of it.
No, I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
And if
thanks.
you oh, go ahead, Bri.
No, thanks for having me on as well.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, thank you guys. And I want to thank everybody who is tuning in. If you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe to the Conscious Broadcast. And we will see you next time for another episode. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye. You hang up on us? Is hanging up on us, Danielle?
Yeah, did she leave? I
Yeah,
I
she
thought
probably
that
just jumped in. That was cool.